Sarah Martinez never imagined that her morning jog through the quiet streets of San Diego would change everything. The 28-year-old marine biologist had always been an early riser, finding peace in the empty sidewalks and cool ocean breeze that swept through her neighborhood at dawn. She had moved to California 3 years ago to work at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, leaving behind her small hometown in Texas and a life that had grown too predictable. As she rounded the corner onto Prospect Street, her running shoes hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm, Sarah noticed something unusual. A black van was parked across from the small coffee shop where she always stopped for her post-run latte. The van had been there yesterday too, and the day before that. In a city where parking spaces were precious, it seemed odd that the same vehicle would occupy the same spot for 3 consecutive days. Sarah slowed her pace, her scientist's mind automatically cataloging details. The van's windows were heavily tinted, making it impossible to see inside. There were no company logos or identifying marks anywhere on the vehicle. Most telling of all, despite the early hour, she could see a faint glow coming from within, suggesting someone was inside. She continued her run, but the van stayed in her thoughts throughout the day. During her lunch break at the research facility, she mentioned it to her colleague, Dr. James Chun, a fellow researcher who specialized in deep-sea ecosystems. "You're probably overthinking it," James said, unwrapping his sandwich. "Could be a private investigator on a case, or maybe someone's cheating spouse getting caught. This is California, remember? Weird stuff happens all the time." But Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had learned to notice when things were out of place. Her father, a retired police officer, had taught her to trust her gut feelings about people and situations. Something about the van felt wrong, purposeful in a way that made her skin crawl. That evening, as she prepared dinner in her small apartment overlooking the Pacific, Sarah found herself checking the street below more often than usual. The van wasn't there, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She closed her curtains earlier than normal and double-checked her door locks before going to bed. The next morning, Sarah decided to change her routine. Instead of her usual route, she jogged through Balboa Park, taking a longer path that would keep her away from the coffee shop. As she ran through the tree-lined paths, enjoying the shade and the sound of birds chirping, she began to feel foolish for her paranoia. But when she emerged from the park and headed toward the main road, her blood ran cold. The same black van was parked near the park's entrance, positioned perfectly to monitor both the main path and the side exits. This time, she was certain someone was following her. Sarah's heart pounded as she considered her options. She could call the police, but what would she tell them? That a van had been parked in different public locations? That wasn't a crime. She could confront whoever was inside, but every instinct screamed against that idea. Instead, she did something that would prove to be life-saving. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Walking casually toward a nearby bench, Sarah pretended to check her messages while actually filming the van. Through her phone screen, she noticed something chilling. The van's rear window was slightly cracked open, just enough for a lens to peek through. Someone was photographing or filming her. As this realization hit her, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was local but unfamiliar. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Miss Martinez," a calm male voice said. "We need to talk." Sarah's mouth went dry. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" "That's not important right now. What matters is that you're in danger, and we're here to help." Walk toward the van slowly. Don't run, and don't call anyone else. "I'm not walking anywhere," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. "If you're really trying to help, you can talk to me right here." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Miss Martinez, look to your left, toward the trees about 50 yards from your current position." Sarah turned her head, squinting in the direction the voice had indicated. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the typical park scenery of oak trees and walking paths. Then, a glint of metal caught her eye. High up in one of the larger trees, barely visible through the leaves, was what appeared to be the barrel of a rifle. "Do you see it now?" the voice asked. Sarah's legs went weak. "What do you want from me?" "We want to keep you alive. The person in that tree isn't one of ours. He's been tracking you for the past week, waiting for the right moment. You changing your routine this morning probably saved your life." "This is insane," Sarah whispered. But even as she said it, She found herself believing the stranger on the phone. Why would anyone want to hurt me? I study fish for a living. Miss Martinez, what you study isn't fish. What you've been working on for the past 6 months has caught the attention of some very dangerous people. The research you think is about marine ecosystems is actually about something much more valuable. Sarah's mind raced. For the past 6 months, she had been part of a team studying unusual bacterial formations found near underwater volcanic vents. The project was funded by a private grant, but she had assumed it was just wealthy environmentalists interested in ocean conservation. The bacteria they had discovered was unlike anything previously documented, capable of surviving in extreme temperatures and producing energy in ways that defied conventional understanding. The bacteria, she said, more to herself than to the voice on the phone. Now you're beginning to understand. Your team has discovered something that could revolutionize energy production. The wrong people getting their hands on your research could change the balance of power in ways you can't imagine. As if to punctuate his words, Sarah heard a sharp crack from the direction of the tree. A piece of bark exploded from a trunk just 10 feet away from where she stood. Someone was shooting at her. Run toward the van now, the voice commanded. Move in a zigzag pattern and keep your head down. Sarah didn't hesitate. Every survival instinct her father had taught her kicked in as she sprinted toward the black van, weaving left and right as more shots rang out behind her. She could hear the bullets whistling past her, some close enough that she felt the air displacement against her skin. The van's side door slid open as she approached, revealing 2 men in tactical gear. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and intense blue eyes, reached out to pull her inside. Get down and stay down, he ordered as she tumbled into the vehicle. The van lurched forward before the door was even fully closed. Through the rear windows, Sarah could see a figure dropping from the tree where the sniper had been positioned. He was dressed in dark clothing and carrying a rifle with a long scope. Who are you people? Sarah gasped, trying to catch her breath. The man with blue eyes studied her for a moment before answering. I'm Commander Rick Peterson, U.S. Navy. This is my team. We've been watching you because we've been watching them. Sarah looked around the van's interior, which was equipped with sophisticated communication equipment and multiple screens showing various camera feeds. It was clearly a mobile command center. The people who want your research aren't just criminals, Peterson continued. They're part of an international network that specializes in stealing and selling scientific breakthroughs to the highest bidder. Your bacterial discovery is worth billions of dollars to certain governments and corporations. But how did you know? Sarah asked. We've been tracking this network for 2 years. When they started showing interest in your project, we knew something big was happening. We managed to intercept some of their communications about a week ago. They were planning to kidnap you and force you to recreate your research for them. Sarah felt sick. What about my team? Dr. Chun, Dr. Rodriguez, the others? Peterson's expression grew grim. They're safe for now, but only because you're the lead researcher. You're the one who understands the bacterial cultivation process completely. Without you, the research is just interesting data on a computer. The van turned onto a highway, and Sarah realized they were heading away from the city. Where are we going? Somewhere safe while we figure out our next move. The problem is, this network has resources and connections we're still discovering. The sniper in the park was just their first attempt. They won't give up easily. As they drove, Peterson explained more about the threat they were facing. The network called itself the Syndicate, and it operated in the shadows of international commerce, stealing cutting-edge research and technology to sell to nations and corporations willing to pay premium prices for competitive advantages. Your bacterial research could be used to create new types of weapons, revolutionary energy sources, or medical treatments that could change global power structures, Peterson said. In the wrong hands, it's extremely dangerous. Sarah stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape of Southern California blur past. Just this morning, her biggest concern had been whether to grab a muffin with her coffee. Now she was apparently at the center of an international conspiracy. What happens to my life? She asked quietly. That depends on what we do next, Peterson replied. We can put you in protective custody, but that might mean giving up your research and your career. Or we can use you to help us stop these people permanently. Use me how? The safe house was nothing like what Sarah had expected. Instead of some underground bunker or abandoned warehouse, Peterson's team had brought her to an upscale beach house in La Jolla, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was hiding from people who wanted to steal her ocean research, while staring at the very waters where she had made her discovery. The best place to hide is sometimes in plain sight, Peterson explained as they walked through the front door. This house belongs to a retired admiral who's helping us with this operation. To anyone watching, you're just a house guest enjoying a beach vacation. Inside, the house buzzed with quiet activity. Sarah counted at least 6 other people, all of whom moved with the same purposeful efficiency as Peterson. They were clearly military, though none wore uniforms. Instead, they dressed like successful business people or casual tourists, blending perfectly with the wealthy neighborhood surrounding them. A woman with short brown hair and sharp green eyes approached them as they entered the main living area. She was petite, but carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres. The woman introduced herself to Sarah. I'll be your primary contact while we sort this mess out. Sarah shook Torres's hand, noting the firm grip and calluses that suggested extensive weapons training. I still can't believe this is really happening. Yesterday, my biggest worry was whether our research grant would be renewed. About that grant, Torres said, glancing at Peterson. We need to discuss something important. They settled into comfortable chairs arranged around a coffee table that, Sarah noticed, provided clear sight lines to all entrances and windows. Even in a safe house, these people never stopped being tactical. The organization that funded your research isn't what you think it is, Peterson began. The Ocean Conservation Initiative appears to be a legitimate environmental foundation, but it's actually a front company controlled by the syndicate. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I met with Dr. Harrison, the foundation's director, multiple times. He's a respected marine biologist with publications going back 20 years. Dr. Harrison is real, and his credentials are genuine, Torres said. But he doesn't know who's really paying his bills. The syndicate is very good at creating layers of separation between their operations and their public faces. So they've been funding my research from the beginning? Sarah asked, feeling sick. Not exactly, Peterson said. They hijacked the funding after your initial discovery 6 months ago. The original grant was legitimate, but when your bacterial samples showed unusual properties, the syndicate began routing money through shell companies to keep your research going. Sarah stood and walked to the large windows, staring out at the ocean. The view that should have been calming now felt ominous. They've been manipulating my work from the beginning. Everything I've discovered, every breakthrough my team has made, it's all been orchestrated. Not orchestrated, Torres corrected. Monitored and exploited, yes. But the science is yours. The discoveries are real, and they're remarkable. Peterson joined Sarah at the window. That's why we need your help. The syndicate plans to steal your research tonight, but they also intend to eliminate you and your team afterward. They want the knowledge without any loose ends. What exactly are they planning? Sarah asked. Torres pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a series of surveillance photos. At 11 p.m. tonight, a team of mercenaries will break into the Scripps facility. They'll steal all your research data and then stage an accident to cover their tracks. The official story will be that you and your team were working late when a gas leak caused an explosion. Sarah studied the photos, which showed armed men in tactical gear examining blueprints of her laboratory. The casual way they discussed murdering innocent scientists made her stomach turn. How do you know all this? She asked. We've been tracking this particular cell for months, Peterson explained. One of their communications specialists got careless, and we've been intercepting their messages. We know their plan, their timeline, and most of their personnel. So why not just stop them? Call the police, alert security at the facility? Because this is bigger than one attack, Torres said. The syndicate has cells operating around the world, stealing research from universities, private labs, and government facilities. If we stop this one operation, they'll just relocate and try again somewhere else. Peterson turned from the window to face Sarah directly. But if we let them think they're succeeding while actually controlling the situation, we can trace their entire network. Find out who's buying stolen research, where their money comes from, and how to shut them down permanently. Sarah was beginning to understand. You want to use me as bait. More than that, Torres said. We want you to help us turn their trap into our trap. Over the next several hours, Peterson and Torres outlined their plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and required Sarah to play a role she had never imagined for herself. The team had discovered that the syndicate's break-in was just the first phase of a larger operation. After stealing Sarah's research, they planned to transport it to a facility somewhere in Mexico, where forced labor would be used to reproduce and weaponize her bacterial discoveries. The transportation route runs through a series of safe houses, Peterson explained, pointing to a map spread across the dining room table. But there's one checkpoint where they have to cross into international waters. That's where we can intercept the entire operation. What would I have to do? Sarah asked. Torres answered. You'd have to go back to the lab tonight and act like everything is normal. When they take you, you'll have a tracking device and a communication link that will allow us to monitor everything. You'll help us identify the key players and their ultimate destination. Sarah felt her heart racing. You're asking me to let myself be kidnapped. We'll have teams positioned at every stage of the route, Peterson assured her. You'll never be out of our sight for more than a few minutes. And you'll be equipped with emergency signals that will bring immediate backup if needed. But what if something goes wrong? What if your tracking fails or they change their route? Torres leaned forward. Then, you'll be relying on skills we're going to teach you over the next few hours. Basic evasion, communication protocols, and self-defense techniques that could save your life. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of these professional warriors who were asking her to trust them with everything she held dear. The logical part of her mind screamed that this was insane, that she should demand they take her to the FBI or witness protection. But another part of her, the part that had always been drawn to the unknown depths of the ocean, recognized something she hadn't expected: opportunity. The syndicate had turned her life's work into a weapon, threatened her colleagues, and tried to murder her. They had made this personal. If I do this, she said slowly, and we succeed, what happens to my research? Peterson and Torres exchanged glances. That would be up to you, Peterson said. The government would certainly be interested in the defense applications, but the basic research could continue under proper security protocols. And my team, they'd be protected and could continue their work if they choose to. Sarah stood and walked to the window again, watching the waves crash against the shore below. In the distance, she could see research vessels heading out for their daily data collection runs, just as she had done countless times before. I need to know something, she said, turning back to the group. Why should I trust you? How do I know you're not just another group trying to steal my work? It was a fair question, and Sarah could see that Peterson respected her for asking it. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Rodriguez, this is Commander Peterson. Could you please verify my identity for a colleague of yours? He handed the phone to Sarah. Her teammate's familiar voice came through clearly. Sarah, thank God you're okay. These people showed up at the lab this morning with federal credentials. They've been showing us evidence of threats against our research. Where are you? Sarah felt a wave of relief hearing her colleague's voice. I'm safe, Miguel. Are you and the others okay? We're fine. We're in protective custody at an undisclosed location. Sarah, the things these people have shown us, it's terrifying. There really are people trying to steal our work. After a few more minutes of conversation, Sarah handed the phone back to Peterson, feeling more confident about the team's legitimacy. All right, she said. What do I need to learn? The next several hours were unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Torres taught her basic hand-to-hand combat, focusing on escape techniques rather than offensive moves. Peterson showed her how to use the sophisticated tracking and communication devices that would keep her connected to the team. Most importantly, they taught her how to think like someone in her situation, how to observe details that could be crucial intelligence, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to recognize opportunities for escape or communication. The key thing to remember, Torres said as they practiced communication protocols, is that you're not helpless. You'll have tools, training, and a team backing you up. Trust your instincts, but don't try to be a hero. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself developing a grudging respect for the complexity of the operation they were planning. Every contingency seemed to have been considered, every risk analyzed, and mitigated. But, as the sun began to set over the Pacific, casting the safe house in gold, Sarah walked through the familiar halls of the Scripps Institution, her footsteps echoing in the quiet evening corridors. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another dedicated researcher pulling a late night in the lab. But, beneath her calm exterior, every nerve was on high alert. The communication device in her ear crackled softly with Torres's voice. "Looking good so far. We have eyes on 3 surveillance positions around the building. They're definitely watching, but they don't seem suspicious of your return." Sarah acknowledged the communication with a subtle nod as she used her key card to access the marine biology wing. The building felt different at night, shadows stretching longer, and every sound seeming amplified in the empty hallways. Her laboratory was exactly as she had left it that morning, though now she viewed everything through different eyes. The bacterial samples that had seemed like fascinating scientific discoveries 12 hours ago now represented something worth killing for. The computers containing months of research data would soon be the target of armed thieves. She settled at her workstation and began what appeared to be routine data analysis, but was actually a careful review of all the research that the syndicate wanted so badly. As she worked, Sarah began to understand why her bacterial discovery was so valuable. The organisms she had found living near underwater volcanic vents didn't just survive in extreme conditions, they thrived in them. More importantly, they produced energy through a process that was completely unlike anything in known biology. If the process could be replicated artificially, it would revolutionize everything from power generation to space exploration. In the wrong hands, the bacteria could also be weaponized. Modified versions could potentially destroy infrastructure, contaminate water supplies, or create biological weapons unlike anything currently in existence. Movement detected. Peterson's voice whispered through her earpiece. 3 vehicles just entered the facility parking lot. Our friends are arriving early. Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but forced herself to continue working normally. Through her laboratory window, she could see the parking lot in the distance. 3 black SUVs had indeed arrived, their occupants remaining inside the vehicles for now. "Remember," Torres's voice said, "act naturally but stay alert. We have teams positioned around the building, but it's going to look like they succeeded in taking you." 20 minutes passed with no visible activity from the SUVs. Sarah began to wonder if the syndicate had changed their plan when she heard the soft beep of her laboratory's security system being bypassed. Someone had accessed the building using sophisticated electronic equipment. She continued working, pretending not to notice as quiet footsteps moved through the corridors outside her lab. The team had rehearsed this moment multiple times that afternoon. She would wait until the intruders actually entered her laboratory before reacting. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Sarah could see shadows moving in the hallway, but no one appeared in the doorway. Were they waiting for something? Her answer came from an unexpected direction. A soft thud from above indicated that someone had accessed the building through the roof. The syndicate wasn't just walking through the front door, they were surrounding her. "We've got movement on multiple levels," Peterson's voice confirmed. "Professional team, definitely military trained. Stay calm." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she tried to continue typing, but she forced herself to focus on the screen. A moment later, her laboratory door opened silently. The man who entered moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to violence. He was tall, lean, and dressed in dark tactical clothing. Most unnervingly, his face showed no emotion whatsoever as he approached her workstation. "Dr. Martinez," he said in accented English that Sarah couldn't quite place. "Please step away from the computer." Sarah looked up with what she hoped was convincing surprise. "Who are you? How did you get in here? That's not important. What matters is that you cooperate fully, and no one gets hurt." 2 more figures entered the laboratory, both carrying sophisticated weapons and electronic equipment. One immediately went to Sarah's computer and began connecting devices that would copy all her research data. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, standing slowly from her chair. "You're coming with us," the first man said. "Your research has attracted interest from people who are willing to pay very well for your expertise. My research is about bacteria. It's hardly worth kidnapping someone over." The man smiled coldly. "Dr. Martinez, we know exactly what your research is worth. The question is whether you want to cooperate voluntarily or if we need to be more persuasive." As if to emphasize his point, one of the other intruders pulled out a weapon that Sarah recognized from the afternoon's training as a tranquilizer gun. These people had no intention of harming her permanently. They needed her alive and functional. "Peterson, they're definitely planning to take me," she whispered as quietly as possible. "Copy that. Let them. We're tracking everything." The data copying process took nearly 30 minutes, during which Sarah sat quietly while the intruders worked with professional efficiency. They spoke very little, communicating mostly through hand signals and brief coded phrases. Finally, the man who seemed to be in charge nodded to his team. "Time to go, Dr. Martinez. Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere you can continue your important work under better funding and security arrangements." Sarah allowed herself to be escorted from the laboratory, noting that the intruders had left no trace of their presence except for the missing data. To anyone investigating later, it would appear that she had simply vanished. They walked through corridors that Sarah had traversed thousands of times, but everything felt surreal now. She was voluntarily walking toward a kidnapping, trusting that the team of Navy SEALs would be able to protect her through whatever came next. The parking lot was quiet except for the 3 SUVs. Sarah was directed toward the middle vehicle, where a fourth person waited, a woman with platinum blonde hair and cold gray eyes. "Dr. Martinez," the woman said with a slight European accent. "I'm Dr. Katarina Voss. I'll be overseeing your transition to your new research facility." "I haven't agreed to any transition," Sarah replied. "Nevertheless, one is occurring. Please get in the vehicle." The interior of the SUV was luxurious, but clearly modified for security. The windows were heavily tinted and appeared to be bulletproof. A partition separated the passenger area from the driver, and Sarah noticed that the door handles had been removed from the inside. Dr. Voss sat across from Sarah as the vehicle began moving. "I want you to understand that this doesn't have to be unpleasant. You're a brilliant scientist, and we're offering you resources and funding that far exceed anything you've had access to before. By kidnapping me, by relocating you to an environment where your work can reach its full potential without bureaucratic interference." As they drove through the darkened streets of San Diego, Dr. Voss explained more about the organization that had taken Sarah. They called themselves the Advanced Research Collective, presenting themselves as a private think tank that freed brilliant scientists from the constraints of traditional academic and government institutions. "Your bacterial research is just the beginning," Dr. Voss said. "Imagine what you could accomplish with unlimited funding, cutting-edge equipment, and a team of the world's best researchers." "What about my colleagues?" "My life here. Your colleagues are talented, but limited by conventional thinking. As for your life here, it was already over the moment you made your discovery. The only question was which organization would recognize its value first." Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear periodic updates from Peterson's team. They were following at a discreet distance, tracking the convoy as it moved through the city and onto the freeway heading south toward Mexico. The drive continued for nearly 2 hours, during which Dr. Voss attempted to persuade Sarah that her situation was actually a tremendous opportunity. She described state-of-the-art laboratories, unlimited research budgets, and the chance to work with other scientists who had been recruited from around the world. "How many other researchers have you kidnapped?" Sarah asked. "Recruited," Dr. Voss corrected. "And enough to create the most advanced research facility in the world. You'll be working alongside physicists who've solved energy problems that governments thought were impossible, biologists who've cracked genetic codes that could extend human life indefinitely, and chemists who've developed materials that could revolutionize manufacturing." Despite her situation, Sarah found herself curious about the scope of the operation. The Advanced Research Collective clearly had enormous resources and had been operating for years without being detected by law enforcement. "What happens if I refuse to cooperate?" she asked. Dr. Voss's expression hardened slightly. "That would be unfortunate for everyone involved. Your research is valuable with or without your cooperation, but it would progress much faster with your willing participation." The convoy turned off the main highway onto a smaller road that led toward the Mexican border. Sarah could see lights ahead that appeared to be some kind of checkpoint or facility. "Border crossing," Peterson's voice whispered in her ear. "This is where it gets interesting." As they approached what Sarah expected to be a border station, she realized that the facility was not official. The buildings were too new, too well-equipped, and staffed by people in military-style uniforms that bore no government insignia. Private border crossing, Dr. Voss explained, noticing Sarah's confusion. Much more efficient than dealing with customs officials. The convoy stopped at a checkpoint where armed guards examined documents that Dr. Voss handed through the window. The entire process took less than 5 minutes, during which Sarah noticed several other vehicles being processed through different lanes. "How many people do you move through here?" she asked. "Scientists, equipment, research materials, whatever the collective needs to maintain its operations. This facility processes hundreds of crossings every month." As they continued into Mexico, Sarah began to understand the true scope. The aircraft was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. From the outside, it appeared to be a standard corporate jet, but once she stepped inside, it became clear that this was a sophisticated mobile command center. The passenger cabin had been converted into workstations equipped with multiple computer screens, satellite communication equipment, and what appeared to be a small laboratory. "Impressive, isn't it?" Dr. Voss said, noting Sarah's expression. "This aircraft allows us to conduct research while traveling between facilities. No time is wasted." Sarah was directed to a comfortable seat near the front of the cabin, where she had a clear view of the other passengers. Besides herself and Dr. Voss, there were 6 other people aboard, 3 who appeared to be security personnel, and 3 who were clearly scientists or researchers. One of the researchers, a nervous-looking man with thick glasses, leaned over to introduce himself as they prepared for takeoff. "Dr. Chen Wei," he said quietly, "quantum physicist from Beijing University. At least, I was until 3 months ago." "You were recruited too?" Sarah asked. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "My research into quantum computing attracted their attention. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse, literally." As the aircraft began taxiing toward the runway, Sarah discreetly activated one of the emergency signals Peterson had given her. It would alert the team that she was about to leave their operational area and provide them with the aircraft's flight path. Through her earpiece, she heard Peterson's voice one last time before they left communication range. "Stay strong. We know where you're going, and we'll be right behind you." The flight lasted nearly 6 hours, during which Sarah learned more about the scope of the Advanced Research Collective's operations. Dr. Voss was surprisingly forthcoming about the organization's history and methods. "We were founded 15 years ago by a consortium of private investors who recognized that the world's most important scientific breakthroughs were being stifled by government bureaucracy and academic politics," she explained. "Our goal is to liberate the world's brightest minds and give them the resources they need to solve humanity's greatest challenges." "By kidnapping them?" Sarah asked. "By offering them opportunities they could never access through conventional channels. Every researcher here has made discoveries that would have taken decades to develop through traditional academic or government programs." Dr. Chun leaned over again during the conversation. "Don't let her fool you," he whispered. "The resources are real, but so are the consequences of refusing to cooperate." Sarah wanted to ask what he meant, but Dr. Voss was watching their interaction closely. Instead, she focused on gathering intelligence about where they were headed and what would be expected of her. "Your new laboratory is equipped with technology that doesn't officially exist yet," Dr. Voss continued. "Electron microscopes with resolution capabilities that won't be commercially available for another decade, genetic sequencing equipment that can map entire genomes in minutes, and bacterial cultivation systems that will allow you to experiment with organisms in conditions that perfectly replicate any environment on Earth." Despite her situation, Sarah found herself genuinely curious about the technology Dr. Voss was describing. As a scientist, the prospect of working with such advanced equipment was undeniably exciting. "How do you acquire technology that doesn't officially exist?" she asked. "Through partnerships with researchers and corporations around the world. Many of our scientists have developed innovations that their home institutions couldn't properly support or understand. Here, those innovations are shared and improved upon by the world's best minds." As the aircraft began its descent, Sarah could see lights ahead that indicated a major facility. Through the small windows, she glimpsed what appeared to be a complex of modern buildings surrounded by high walls and extensive security measures. "Welcome to Research Station Alpha," Dr. Voss announced. Your new home. The aircraft landed on a private runway within the facility's perimeter. As they disembarked, Sarah was struck by the scale of the operation. The complex was enormous, with multiple laboratory buildings, residential facilities, and what appeared to be manufacturing or production areas. How many people work here? She asked as they walked toward the main building. Currently, we have 347 researchers representing 23 different scientific disciplines, Dr. Voss replied, plus support staff, security personnel, and administrative teams. The main building's lobby was designed to impress, with soaring ceilings, modern artwork, and displays showcasing various scientific achievements. To a casual observer, it would appear to be the headquarters of a successful technology company rather than a kidnapping operation. Sarah was taken to what Dr. Voss called the Orientation Center, where she underwent a process that was part recruitment presentation and part psychological evaluation. She was shown videos of the facility's various laboratories, introduced to the research projects currently underway, and given detailed explanations of the benefits and privileges accorded to the facility's researchers. Your accommodations include a private apartment with all amenities, access to recreational facilities including a full gymnasium and swimming pool, and a dining hall staffed by world-class chefs, the orientation coordinator explained. Many of our researchers find that their quality of life here exceeds anything they experienced in their previous positions. But, beneath the pleasant presentation, Sarah noticed disturbing details. Security cameras were everywhere. All personnel wore identification badges with tracking chips, and none of the researchers she met made eye contact for more than a few seconds. When the orientation concluded, Sarah was assigned to living quarters in a residential building that felt more like a luxury prison than a dormitory. Her apartment was spacious and well-appointed, but the windows were barred and the door locked from the outside. Dr. Chun Wei was housed in the same building, and that evening he managed to visit her apartment under the pretense of discussing research collaboration. "Listen carefully," he said in a whisper that would be difficult for surveillance equipment to detect. "This place is not what they pretend it is. Yes, the research facilities are incredible, and yes, we've made discoveries that would be impossible anywhere else. But there's no leaving. Ever." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean that researchers who've tried to quit or escape have disappeared. Officially, they've been transferred to other facilities, but none of us believe that. There are rumors about what happens to people who become too difficult to manage." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "How many people have disappeared?" "At least a dozen since I've been here. The most recent was Dr. Elizabeth Hoffman, a German biochemist who started asking too many questions about who was funding her research and what it was being used for." "When did she disappear?" 2 weeks ago. Dr. Voss announced that she had been promoted to a leadership position at another facility, but her apartment was cleaned out overnight, and none of her friends here have heard from her since. As Dr. Chun continued sharing information about life at the facility, Sarah began to understand the true nature of her situation. The Advanced Research Collective had created a scientific paradise that was also a sophisticated prison. Researchers were kept compliant through a combination of incredible resources and subtle threats. "The worst part," Dr. Chen said, "is that some of the research being conducted here is genuinely revolutionary. If it were being done ethically, it could benefit all of humanity. Instead, it's being sold to the highest bidders regardless of their intentions." "What kind of research?" Sarah asked. "Everything imaginable. New weapons systems, surveillance technologies, biological agents that could be used for population control. There's no ethical oversight whatsoever." Over the following days, Sarah was given tours of the facility and introduced to her new laboratory. The equipment Dr. Voss had described was even more impressive in person. Sarah had access to technology that would have cost millions of dollars and taken years to acquire through normal academic channels. But as she began her work, she also began implementing the plan that Peterson's team had developed. Using techniques she had learned during her brief training, Sarah began gathering intelligence about the facility's operations, security measures, and personnel. She discovered that the facility was located on a private island approximately 200 miles off the coast of Colombia. The island was completely self-sufficient, with its own power generation, water treatment, and food production capabilities. More importantly, it was heavily fortified with sophisticated defense systems that would make any rescue attempt extremely challenging. The research being conducted at the facility was indeed remarkable, but it was also deeply disturbing. Sarah found evidence of weapons development projects that violated multiple international treaties, surveillance technology that could track individual people anywhere on Earth, and biological research that could be used to create devastating pandemics. Her own bacterial research was being fast-tracked toward weaponization. Within a week of her arrival, other scientists had developed methods for mass-producing her organisms and modifying them to survive in different environments. The potential applications were terrifying. "We need to find a way to communicate with the outside world," Sarah told Dr. Chun during one of their carefully orchestrated conversations. "People need to know what's happening here." "It's impossible," he replied. "All communications are monitored. The internet access is restricted to approved research sites, and the island's location makes unauthorized radio transmissions detectable within minutes." Sarah spent the day of the planned extraction trying to maintain her normal routine while mentally preparing for what was to come. She worked in her laboratory, attended the mandatory evening meal in the facility's dining hall, and participated in what appeared to be casual conversations with other researchers. But every moment was carefully calculated to position herself for the rescue operation. At 10:30 p.m., she received the final signal through her hidden communication device. "Commencing operation. Stay in your quarters. Do not approach windows." Sarah retreated to her apartment and positioned herself in the bathroom, which was the most secure location she had identified during her weeks of careful observation. She had disabled the surveillance camera in that room by creating what appeared to be an accidental water leak that obscured the lens. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the facility's power grid went dark. The blackout lasted only 30 seconds before backup generators restored minimal lighting, but those 30 seconds were enough for Peterson's team to begin their assault. Sarah could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching the island, followed by what sounded like small explosions around the facility's perimeter. The facility's alarm system began wailing, and Sarah could hear security personnel running through the corridors outside her apartment. Through her earpiece, she heard Peterson's voice. "Sarah, we're coming for you. Stay exactly where you are until we reach you." The sounds of combat were unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Gunfire echoed through the buildings, punctuated by larger explosions that shook the entire structure. She could hear shouting in multiple languages as security forces tried to coordinate their response to an attack they clearly hadn't anticipated. Her apartment door exploded inward 23 minutes after the operation began. Sarah tensed, preparing to defend herself if the intruders were facility security rather than her rescuers. "Dr. Martinez," a familiar voice called out. It was Torres, dressed in full combat gear and carrying sophisticated weapons that Sarah recognized from her brief training. "Here," Sarah responded, emerging from the bathroom. Torres quickly checked her for injuries before speaking into her radio. "Package secured." Moving to extraction point, they left the apartment and moved through corridors that were filled with smoke and debris. The facility's sophisticated security systems had been systematically disabled by the SEAL team, but pockets of resistance remained throughout the complex. "What about the other researchers?" Sarah asked as they navigated through the chaos. "Second extraction team is handling that," Torres replied. "Our intelligence indicates that most of the scientists here are being held against their will. We're taking everyone who wants to leave." They reached a stairwell that led to the facility's roof, where Sarah could see a helicopter waiting with its rotors spinning. But as they began climbing the stairs, gunfire erupted from above. "Snipers on the roof," Torres said into her radio. "Need immediate suppression." The response was swift and devastating. Sarah watched through a window as other members of the SEAL team engaged the facility's defensive positions with precision that was almost surgical. The snipers who had been positioned to prevent exactly this kind of escape were neutralized within minutes. "Clear to proceed," came the response over Torres's radio. They reached the roof to find a scene of controlled chaos. The helicopter was surrounded by SEAL team members providing security while other rescuers escorted researchers toward the aircraft. Sarah recognized Dr. Chun among the evacuees, along with several other scientists she had met during her time at the facility. But As they approached the helicopter, a new threat emerged. Dr. Voss appeared on the roof, flanked by heavily armed security personnel who had managed to avoid the initial assault. "Dr. Martinez," Dr. Voss called out over the noise of the helicopter. "You don't understand what you're destroying. The research here could save millions of lives." Sarah found herself responding with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. "Not when it's being sold to people who want to use it to kill millions instead." Dr. Voss raised a weapon, but before she could fire, the situation changed dramatically. Peterson appeared behind her position, having approached through a route that Sarah hadn't seen. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds and ended with Dr. Voss and her security team disarmed and restrained. "Time to go," Peterson announced, gesturing toward the helicopter. The flight to safety took 2 hours, during which Sarah learned about the scope of the operation that had rescued her. 3 SEAL teams had coordinated the assault on the island facility, while simultaneously conducting raids on advanced research collective operations in 5 other countries. "We've been building this case for 8 months, Peterson explained over the helicopter's intercom system. "Your intelligence from inside the facility gave us the final pieces we needed to move against their entire network." Dr. Chun, who was seated near Sarah in the helicopter, looked stunned by the revelation that Sarah had been working with law enforcement throughout her captivity. "You were undercover the whole time?" he asked. "Not undercover exactly," Sarah replied, "but working with people who were trying to stop all of this." The helicopter landed at a U.S. military base in Colombia, where Sarah and the other rescued researchers underwent extensive debriefing sessions with federal agents and military intelligence officers. The information they provided would be used to prosecute the remaining members of the Advanced Research Collective and to identify other criminal organizations engaged in similar activities. Over the following weeks, Sarah learned about the full impact of the operation. The raids had resulted in the arrest of 127 individuals connected to the organization, the seizure of research facilities on 4 continents, and the recovery of stolen intellectual property worth billions of dollars. More importantly to Sarah, the operation had freed 89 researchers who had been held against their will and prevented the weaponization of countless scientific discoveries. "What happens now?" Sarah asked during one of her final debriefing sessions with Peterson and Torres. "That's up to you," Peterson replied. "Your research is still your research. The government would be interested in supporting continued development under proper security protocols, but the choice is yours." Sarah considered the offer carefully. Her experience with the Advanced Research Collective had shown her how dangerous unrestricted scientific research could be, but it had also demonstrated the incredible potential of well-funded, cutting-edge investigation. "I want to continue the work," she said finally, "but with proper oversight and ethical guidelines. And I want to make sure that Dr. Chun and the other researchers have the same opportunity." 6 months later, Sarah found herself back at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, but now as the director of a new research initiative funded jointly by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense. Her bacterial research continued, but now with applications focused specifically on environmental remediation and sustainable energy production. Dr. Chun had accepted a position with her new research team, as had several other scientists who had been rescued from the island facility. Together, they were working to ensure that their discoveries would benefit humanity rather than threaten it. The Advanced Research Collective had been completely dismantled, but Sarah knew that other organizations with similar goals would eventually emerge. The challenge for the scientific community was to remain vigilant against those who would steal and weaponize research while continuing to pursue the discoveries that could make the world a better place. Sarah's morning jogs through San Diego were peaceful again, but she now carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced extreme danger and emerged stronger. She had learned that she was capable of courage she hadn't known she possessed, and that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries were those that revealed the true character of the people making them. The black van that had started her ordeal was gone, replaced by discreet security measures that she barely noticed but knew were there. Her research continued, protected now by people who understood its value and committed to ensuring that it would be used for the right purposes. As she worked in her laboratory each day, surrounded by technology that would help unlock the secrets of organisms that could change the world. Sarah remembered the lessons she had learned during her weeks of captivity. The most dangerous aspect of any scientific discovery wasn't the knowledge itself, but the intentions of those who sought to control it. Her bacterial research had indeed proven to be revolutionary, leading to new methods of environmental cleanup and sustainable energy production that benefited communities around the world. But, more importantly, her experience had contributed to the development of international protocols for protecting researchers and preventing the theft of scientific discoveries. The snipers who had been trained on her during that terrifying morning in Balboa Park had learned that Navy SEALs react faster than anyone anticipated. But Sarah had learned something even more important, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Her story became a case study in how criminal organizations could exploit the scientific community and how law enforcement agencies could work with researchers to protect both intellectual property and human lives. The Advanced Research Collective was gone, but the lessons learned from its destruction would help protect future generations of scientists from similar threats. Sarah Martinez had begun as a marine biologist studying interesting bacteria in the depths of the ocean. She had emerged as someone who understood that the most important discoveries often came not from looking deeper into nature, but from looking more carefully at the intentions of those around us. The bacterial samples that had started everything continued to provide new insights into the possibilities of life in extreme conditions. But now those insights were being developed openly, ethically, and with the full support of institutions committed to using science for the betterment of humanity. In the end, the snipers had been fast, but the SEALs had been faster. More importantly, the truth had been fastest of all. But Sarah had an advantage that Dr. Chen didn't know about. The tracking and communication devices Peterson's team had given her were more sophisticated than the facility's security systems could detect. She had been sending regular status updates whenever she could safely activate the emergency transmitters. 3 weeks after her arrival, Sarah received a signal through her hidden communication device that changed everything. Peterson's team had not only tracked her to the island, but they had also been conducting surveillance of the facility's operations and building a case that would expose the entire network. The message was brief but filled with hope. Extraction planned for tomorrow night. Be ready. Sarah realized that her ordeal was about to end, but she also knew that the most dangerous part of her mission was just beginning. Getting off the island would require not only courage and skill, but also a level of luck that she could only hope would be sufficient. As she prepared for what might be her last night as a prisoner of the Advanced Research Collective, Sarah reviewed everything she had learned about the facility's operations. The intelligence she had gathered would be crucial for ensuring that this scientific prison could never threaten another researcher. Tomorrow night, she would discover whether Navy SEALs really could react faster than the snipers who would undoubtedly try to stop them. Of what she was dealing with. The Advanced Research Collective wasn't just a criminal organization stealing research. It was a parallel scientific infrastructure that operated completely outside government oversight. "We're approaching the transfer point," Dr. Voss announced as they turned onto a dirt road leading toward what appeared to be an airfield. In the distance, Sarah could see a large aircraft waiting with its engines running. Around the airfield, dozens of vehicles and hundreds of personnel were engaged in what looked like a major logistical operation. "Where does the plane go?" Sarah asked. "To your new home. A research facility that will allow you to pursue your work without any limitations." As their SUV approached the aircraft, Sarah felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Everything now depended on whether Peterson and his team could execute their plan before she disappeared into an international network that might make rescue impossible. The vehicle stopped near the aircraft's boarding stairs, and Dr. Voss gestured for Sarah to exit. "Welcome to the next phase of your career, Dr. Martinez." Sarah stepped out of the SUV and looked around the busy airfield, knowing that Peterson's team was watching everything through her tracking devices. Somewhere in the darkness around the facility, Navy SEALs were preparing to spring the trap that would bring down the entire operation. But first, Sarah had to get on the plane and hope that her training would be enough to survive whatever came next. In light, Sarah realized that all the planning in the world couldn't eliminate the fundamental danger of what she was about to do. "It's time," Peterson said, checking his watch. "We need to get you back to the lab before their surveillance teams notice you've been gone too long." Sarah took a deep breath and gathered the small collection of equipment that would be her lifeline over the next several hours. A nearly invisible tracking device, a communication earpiece disguised as a hearing aid, and an emergency beacon that would summon immediate backup. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Torres pulled Sarah aside for a final conversation. "You're braver than you know," Torres said. "But remember, being brave doesn't mean being fearless. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. We'd rather abort the mission than lose you." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of what she was about to undertake. In a few hours, she would walk back into her laboratory knowing that armed mercenaries were coming for her. Everything depended on her ability to play her role convincingly while helping to orchestrate the downfall of the people who had turned her peaceful research into a weapon of war. As they drove back toward the Scripps facility through the darkening San Diego streets, Sarah realized that the person she had been that morning no longer existed. The woman who had worried about coffee shop parking spaces and research grant renewals was gone, replaced by someone who was about to walk deliberately into the most dangerous situation of her life. The van stopped several blocks from the laboratory, and Sarah prepared to step back into her old life for what might be the last time. Peterson leaned forward. "The syndicate thinks they're hunting you, but with the right plan, we could turn you into the hunter instead." The van continued down the highway as Sarah considered options she had never imagined having to face. Behind them, the sniper was probably already reporting his failure to his handlers. Sarah Martinez, the marine biologist who just wanted to study interesting bacteria, was about to become the center of a deadly game between forces she was only beginning to understand. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the California landscape, Sarah realized that her old life was already over. The question now was what kind of new life she would choose to build from the ashes of her former existence. The van's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Peterson picked up the handset and listened to a series of coded messages before turning to Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Change of plans," he said. "We've just learned that the syndicate has moved up their timeline. They're planning something big, and it's happening tonight."